It is a winter afternoon in Bowling Green, Ohio. Inside a modest laboratory at the State University, a bearded neuroscientist bends over a plexiglass box. A young rat scurries across his palm. He extends 2 fingers and begins absurdly to tickle its belly. The scientist is Jaak Panksepp, and he is listening for a sound no human ear can hear. Panksepp was born in Estonia in 1943, in the shadow of a world at war. His family fled the Soviet occupation and eventually settled in the United States. He trained as a psychologist, then turned toward the brain itself. By the 1970s, he was mapping the neural circuits behind emotions that science had long dismissed as unmeasurable. He wanted to know what animals feel. For most of the 20th century, mainstream psychology avoided the question. Behaviorists like B.F. Skinner insisted that inner feelings were unknowable and therefore unscientific. Animals were black boxes to be measured by their outputs. To speak of a rat's joy or a dog's grief was considered sentimental, even embarrassing. Panksepp refused to accept this silence. He argued that emotions were not decorative. They were ancient, biological, and shared across mammals. Deep in the brain, beneath the cortex, lay circuits older than language itself. Panksepp began to name them, mapping 7 core systems he would later call SEKING: rage, fear, lust, care, panic, and play. Each, he believed, was a doorway into the animal mind. It was the last of these, play, that would lead him to his strangest discovery. In the 1990s, Panksepp and his graduate student, Jeff Bergdorf, noticed something curious about young rats. When they wrestled and tumbled together, they emitted rapid, high-frequency chirps. The sounds sat at 50 kHz, far above the range of human hearing. Something was happening in that silence. Using bat detectors that lowered the frequencies into audible range, the researchers listened. What they heard astonished them. The chirps came in bright, staccato bursts, tightly linked to moments of rough-and-tumble play. They sounded uncannily like tiny giggles. Panksepp began to wonder whether laughter itself had a history far older than humanity. To test the idea, he did what few scientists would risk their reputation on. He tickled the rats. His fingers moved across their bellies and flanks in quick, playful strokes, mimicking the contact of a rat wrestling partner. The chirps exploded in frequency. The rats chased his hand, seeking more. They preferred tickled zones of their cage over untickled ones. The results, published in the early 2000s, were controversial from the start. Critics accused Panksepp of anthropomorphism, of projecting human joy onto twitching whiskers. Others found the work whimsical, unserious, undignified for a neuroscientist. Panksepp was unmoved. He believed the burden of proof had shifted. If the behavior looked like laughter and the circuits behind it resembled ours, then denial itself required explanation. The evidence grew stronger. Young rats chirped most. Older rats chirped less, just as human children laugh more freely than adults. Rats that were anxious or those bred for depressive traits chirped little at all. When given anti-anxiety drugs, their giggles returned. The ultrasonic vocalizations behaved exactly like an emotional signal should. Panksepp went further. He located the neural machinery in a deep midbrain region and mapped its chemistry. Opioids amplified the calls. Dopamine drove the seeking of them. He argued that this was not a metaphor for joy but joy itself, in one of its oldest evolutionary forms. Somewhere in the mammalian lineage, laughter had been born long before jokes. The implications rippled outward. If rats laughed, then joy was not a human invention. It was a shared inheritance, tens of millions of years old. Play was not a frivolous behavior, but a fundamental survival system, wiring young brains for cooperation, risk, and social bonding. Panksepp had turned a nursery room activity into a window on evolution itself. His broader framework, which he called effective neuroscience, gained traction slowly. In 1998, he published the field's defining textbook, laying out the 7 emotional systems in meticulous anatomical detail. Younger researchers, drawn to questions their teachers had forbidden, began to take his work seriously. The idea that animals possessed subjective feelings was moving, cautiously, from heresy toward hypothesis. There were consequences beyond the laboratory. If rats experienced joy, then they could also experience its opposite. Panksepp's work put new pressure on the ethics of animal research, of factory farming, of laboratory isolation. A creature capable of giggling was not merely a biological machine. It was, in some meaningful sense, a subject, a being whose life could go well or badly. Panksepp himself was gentle, mischievous, a scientist who could weep at Beethoven and grin while tickling a rodent. Colleagues described lectures interrupted by the recorded chirps of laughing rats, played through the auditorium speakers. He performed the sound for talk shows, for schoolchildren, for skeptics. He seemed to relish the strangeness of it, the way it disarmed his critics before argument could begin. Yet resistance persisted. Some neuroscientists insisted that the chirps were merely reflexive vocalizations, not evidence of any inner state. Panksepp countered that the same logic, applied consistently, would deny laughter to human infants too. The question, he argued, was not whether feelings could be proved with certainty, but whether the weight of biological evidence pointed one way or the other. He thought it clearly did. His curiosity extended into medicine. If play was a real neural system, then its absence might underlie disorders like depression and attention deficits. Panksepp explored whether rough-and-tumble play could serve as therapy, whether the joy circuits could be tuned by drugs or by experience. His work influenced new thinking in child development, autism research, and psychiatric care. Laughter in his hands became a clinical concept. In 2014, Panksepp co-authored a sweeping book with the philosopher Lucy Biven, titled The Archaeology of Mind. It read as both scientific treatise and quiet manifesto. Emotions, they argued, were the bedrock of consciousness itself. To understand the mind, one had to descend beneath thought, into the layered circuits humans share with mice, with elephants, with every warm-blooded creature. Feeling came first. Cognition came later. Jaak Panksepp died in April 2017 at the age of 73. Tributes poured in from neuroscientists, philosophers, and animal welfare advocates. His obituaries mentioned the tickled rats always. It had become his signature image, the small absurd gesture that captured a lifetime of serious argument. He had made the invisible audible and the dismissed undeniable. Today, his ultrasonic recordings still play in classrooms and conference halls. The chirps sound like bubbles or wind chimes, or a child's stifled laugh behind a hand. Researchers now study joy in dolphins, in apes, in dogs, extending the map Panksepp began to draw. The question of animal feeling is no longer taboo. It is a frontier. And somewhere in a laboratory whose lights hum through the night, a rat is being tickled. Its whiskers twitch. Its tiny body arches toward a human hand. Above the threshold of hearing at 50 kHz it laughs. Jaak Panksepp is not there to hear it, but he taught the world how to listen.